us the first time. We weren't ready, and we're not going to get ready, in a month. And so I was just on a conference call yesterday and learned that our second attempt will be just 6 school districts instead of the whole state. And we were just as shocked as everybody else because we thought we were on the subcommittee to help define that. But clearly somebody had another political agenda, and they picked the school districts. Yours happened to be one of them, LA Unified. But, I think that we need to be quick. We mustn't be so quick to chase after the money. We need to look at what is it going to do for our children. Remember the idea of layering programs on top of a failing system? We need to understand that. And I think Race to the Top money, while it looks attractive because of our budget crisis, is it really going to create the changes, the bold reforms, all of this? Is this in that application? I don't think so. Okay, so I'm just saying, I think we need to be mindful that while the money's attractive, we mustn't be quick to run after it because we think it's going to, bring us some good. That's just my.
Thank you. Any other comments, Senator Romero?
Thank you so very much for disrupting the discourse. I think we need to do more of that. There's just been so much that has been testified to since this hearing began at 2:45 this afternoon. I think on a couple of things. Whatever one thought of Race to the Top, and I did support it, what just bothered me is so much of what I've heard during that debate and subsequent to that debate. And there are different perspectives on different sides with respect to teacher evaluation, et cetera. And I do support linking teacher performance with student outcome, not as the only factor, but one part of the measure, a portfolio. Yes. But what I kept hearing over and over and over, and what I do not accept, is the reference to those kids. Those kids. I think when I've heard the testimony today about the perception, if we start by believing that every child can learn, and the public school system is public, and these are our customers, these are our constituents, the parents, I believe, are the ultimate CEOs of the system. We've got to start by having, turning around the perceptions. And so I think that it was interesting just to listen to the conversation today still about the underlying attitudes and the expectations. I represent East LA in the state senate, and just a few weeks ago, I was in East LA helping to bury Jaime Escalante, award-winning professor who also dealt with the issue of low expectations for children at Garfield High School. And so it's interesting just to listen to the parallels. On the question of dividing students, you're absolutely right. This is something where poverty students, Latino, African American, there's so much I think that's in common. I joined in calling on the Office of Civil Rights, the Federal Office of Civil Rights, to do an investigation of LA Unified with respect to the academic outcomes of African American children. And I was called, there was a little bit of alarm because there had been an initiated investigation of ELL students. And I said, well, it's not about picking one or the other. We can do an investigation of all. And so, but it's interesting, once again, to hear sort of that pitting between Latino students and African American students, when I think, given the, quite frankly, the deplorable statistics that you have cited today and that we know, that we absolutely need to have an investigation of all things here. Finally, let me just say on the question of charter schools, and I am a strong supporter of looking at choices for parents in public education, including quality charter schools. There was a recent study that talked about segregation of charter schools, and you go back then, you look and you think, well, these are parents, and there was some testimony to this earlier about especially African American parents saying, my kids get one shot at an education, and if the local neighborhood school is not going to turn around, and how many years do I have to wait, then I will take my child. I will get on a bus. I will drive across town. I will do what I need to do to get my child an education. Parents shouldn't have to do that, but I'm not going to say that I'm going to take away that right for a parent to say, I'm going to put my kid first and do what I need to do to get there. So I want to thank you for your testimony. African American children in California schools, 7% of the student population. But if we look at our state prison system, and if we look at San Quentin in particular, and if we zero in on death row, African Americans, 40% of the condemned on death row. If we do not educate, we will incarcerate. Real disparate impacts. It begins with early education. I just applaud your work and your testimony, and thank you for disrupting the discourse. We need to do more of it. Thank you.
Yes, let's thank our panelists again. Not to reopen the discussion on Race to the Top, I also supported Race to the Top, and it wasn't really chasing the money. Certainly competition was a part of it. But for me, it was also accountability. Parents I talked to were just frustrated with the way things are going. And they want more accountability and more access. And so we're hopeful that our discussions today will help foster a path to both of those. All right, our final panel, community and parent engagement. Thank you. And we'd like to invite up to the table Dr. Deborah Keys, Vice President, Voices for African American Students in Oakland, Linson Moore Bilieu, National Council on Educating Black Children, and Alicia Harris. Are they with us? From the Arthur A. Benjamin Health Professions High School. We're almost there, gang. Those of you who that are hanging will have a chance to ask some questions, make some comments, and
Nice to meet you too.
okay.
I guess I should say good evening.
So,
members
Dr. Keys, the floor is yours.
of the caucus, Senator Romero. Thank you so much for inviting us here today. I'm sorry that the evening kind of has been a little long for a lot of folks, but I know a lot of information has been shared that's very valuable and very important. I think I was trying to summarize some of the things that I wanted to say, because a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said, and I know I don't necessarily need to belabor it. I think we were all on the same page about that. I just wanted to let you know who Voices for African American Students, who we are. We are just a coalition of educators and community members who are concerned about the future of African American students. And we really do have a mission about changing and wanting to affect policy and legislation that will benefit our African American students. That really is one of the primary focuses of us. I think you have this PowerPoint that I'm going to speak from today, so you can, when you have a chance, you can take a look at what our mission and our core values and beliefs are, because I think it's really important. I want you to understand the direction from which we come. I wanted to address just a few of the points that, the questions that were put before us. And I think, like I said, a lot of it has already been said, and I just want to maybe reiterate a few and to add to. What are some of the factors that contribute to student achievement gaps for African American students? We really believe, and I think it's already been said, that, really, according to research, that they fall under two main categories and that are outlined in what I'm going to talk about. Factors related to the quality of the schools many of our African American students attend, and factors related to socioeconomic status, cultural environment, and our family backgrounds. Now, we have some real issues and real impediments in our educational system that has already been spoken. Many school personnel are not able to form successful partnerships with parents, especially those parents who do not have successful school experiences. Parents are really literally afraid to come to the school because they really don't know how to interact with the school. Many schools, particularly low-quality schools, have low expectations for African American students, and we've said this time and time again today, and it's absolutely the truth, because we have students who are, particularly in our large urban schools, our students come to school looking a certain way, and because they look a certain way, there's a certain level of expectations of them which is not necessarily that of high success. many school operating communities in which education is not sufficiently promoted. Institutions of higher education are not effectively preparing teachers to be successful in urban environments. They actually are being educated from a theoretical basis. They do student teaching sometimes in some of our urban schools. However, they're just very ill prepared to come in to our schools and deal with the issues and some of the conditions that our students bring to the classroom. These are some of the impediments. Leadership and instructional practices are not aligned with what research proves to be the most effective way of dealing with our kids. Also, there is a lack of quality pre-K educational programs. I mean, a lot of our students are coming to school without the prerequisite skills that they need to be successful, so we really do need to address the issue of our pre-K programs, lack of teacher capacity to engage and motivate African American students, and an education system which prioritizes adults over our students, particularly in areas of tenure for teachers. I think it was touched on today. Right now, we really do have an issue with the teacher quality. Not all teachers that are teaching African American kids are poor quality teachers, but there are many of them that are, and it's an impossible task to try to get them out. And so because we have a system now that pretty much value and protects the adults, our kids, of course, are on the losing end. Now, I have to say that, our families and we as a culture and as a community, we really do need to kind of focus on what can we do to address some of the deficits or some of the needs, shall I say, that we have in our community. And some of these issues are, we, of course, have the lack of health insurance and quality health care. Frequent changes in residence disrupting continuity in students' schools experience, lack of books and other tools in the home that provide support for cognitive development. Many a times our students have books and they leave them at school, and then once they're at school, that's it. When they go home, there's nothing more for them to assist or to help them with their educational experience. We have a kind of a lack of parental orientation toward promoting educational success, and that's not in all of our African American homes, but that is a real issue that we as a community need to address. A lack of a stable family support system. Many of our kids are being now raised by grandmothers and extended family members, and because of that, it causes a disruption in our kids' balance of a family life, and they bring that to school. We have a lack of consistent effective child rearing techniques in our home, lack of appropriate diet for many of our students, overexposure to violence and other negative influences in many of our communities, which is something that has really created for our students a condition of acceptability in violence and in negativity. And we are seeing this being played out in some of the gangs and other groups that are forming on our large urban campuses. And we also have the lack of adult readers as role models in our community. We really, I think, need to come together as a community and figure out a way that if we do not have readers in the home, that there must be readers in the community, whether it be via our churches or whether it's our community centers, our Boys and Girls Club, someone to show our students that reading is important, and this is something that we need to be able to promote for their quality education. Now, I'd like to touch on what are some of the best practices, really, that we think that would make a difference. And I'd like to talk about some of the best practices are of high-quality schools that provide consistent research-based, standard-focused instruction. I mean, it's Jeffrey Canada, who wrote the Harlem's Children's Zone, actually talked about this in the work that he's doing, and he's had great success. So we have to really provide parent training programs to increase their knowledge and engagement in their children's education. Many of our parents really don't know how to assist their kids to be successful in school. We need to be able to provide support for that. We need to develop and support academically oriented mentoring programs that really are focused on the academics piece of our children's education. Teachers need to become more conscious of their attitudes and behaviors so they do not unintentionally communicate low expectations for underachieving students. We've talked about here today having some teacher training for teachers to help educate our students. I do want to say, number one, that our students should be held to the same standards as any other child in the state of California. We have some very rigorous content standards here in California, and there is absolutely no reason in the world why our students cannot rise to the same level of any other group of students. And this is something, it's not about giving our students something different academically, but it is in relationship to what is expected of them. You call on them less, they will answer less. If you give them an out, they will take the out. You must have expectation that they are to achieve just like any other student in the classroom. Teachers having high expectations for all students is one of the most effective practices for ensuring high levels of student achievement for our students. Teachers must use strategies that promote active and meaningful participation, provide specific and explicit instruction in academic English development, and use instructional approaches that are flexible enough to appeal to individual students' interests and their abilities. Now, there was a question also that was asked about what about district leadership? What is the role of district and school leadership in eliminating the gap? Districts and school leaderships need to have the ability and resources to organize systems and provide very clear and specific educational programs. And what do I mean by this? Districts should develop very clear and concise plan to increase the quality of instructional programs and instruction. Right now, there is, in some areas there is a disconnect between what is going on at the central office level and what is going on at the site level. There has to be a cohesive, concise way that district office is going to support what needs to happen at the school level, so that the schools will not be bogged down with the thought that it is just at the school level where the educational process is going to be valued the most, and the district is just layering compliance pieces on top of them. We need to have central office needs to hold principals accountable for implementing academic improvement plans with fidelity. I mean, we do have instructional programs that are effective, but if there is no one from the central office level monitoring whether or not principals are holding teachers accountable for the fidelity of these instructional programs, then there's never ever going to be any success to happen with it. Site administrators need to hold schools and staff accountable for full implementation of improvement plans, and whether they are the improvement plans from that we are focusing on with DATE or SATE, or right now it's the consistently or persistently low achieving schools. Central office needs to develop and implement a support plan for sites to ensure that services are aligned to supporting the school sites in the academic program. Now, there are several impediments that need to be removed, and those are: 1, the difficulty in removing ineffective teachers; the lack of quality training programs for teachers and administrators; and the lack of funding for purchasing current adopted research and standard-based instructional material. And as you know, right now there's a hold or a moratorium or a delay on funding for purchasing instructional material, and the schools and the districts that end up suffering the most are our urban districts, because our students are the ones that will have the least amount of current and confirmed research-based instructional material. And if there is no mandate for the districts to purchase, if there is no funding for the districts to purchase, they're not going to purchase, because, I mean, there's no impetus to make that happen. I would like to just basically close my portion of the presentation with 4 specific recommendations I hope and think that are doable from the legislators, that I think that needs to really be implemented. And one is that support the continuation of the African American Advisory Committee that was appointed by the SBE, the State Board of Education, in January 2009. VOS, lobbied the State Board of Education to appoint an advisory body to focus on issues of the achievement or lack thereof of African American students. There is an ELAC, and not that there should not be a focus on English learners, but there need to be also a laser-like focus on African American students. And the State Board did approve this advisory body. It came into existence as of January 2009, and it should remain in existence until we no longer have an achievement gap. There need not be an exit strategy. It needs to remain in focus. So your support of that advisory body is absolutely critical. Also, one of the things that is extremely important right now when we're looking at accountability as far as schools are concerned is we are asking that you support the lowering of the accountability threshold for the performance level of all African American students while honoring the Privacy Act. Right now, in order for a group to be considered numerically significant, the number is 100. We have pockets of African American students across the state that are in schools that if it's 50 students or less, it is, those students do not count in the accountability picture, and therefore the schools or the district attention on their proficiency or raising their proficiency is off the radar screen. There are no mandates and there's no reason for them to be forced to do that. So we really do need to lower the number or the threshold because our students are being lost in the averages. Okay, you can have a school that has, a 900 API, but they have only 50 African American students in the school, and as a result of that, if those students are failing, or there are less than 30% of them that are performing at proficient level, it doesn't matter. The school will receive no sort of consequences for that. The other would be establish an ongoing open line of communication with VOS and some of the other members who presented here today to help and assist in understanding educational impact of proposed legislation on African American students. Because I understand there are a lot of legislation and a lot of things that come in front of you, and I really do believe that if you have the support and the assistance of educators who are aware and understand the effect that legislation could possibly have on African American students, it will be critical as to the position that you will take. So we really strongly support and encourage this open line of communication. And lastly, please support the funding that will ensure that up-to-date adopted instructional material reach the students in the classroom. Currently, districts do not have to purchase materials until 2013-14. By the next instructional material adoption, the reading material will be 16 years old. And I realize that a lot was said today about the instructional material, but I want to say this, is that I sat on the Curriculum Commission for 4 years, along with Dr. Norma Baker, who is the president of VOS. We worked extremely hard to have some of the academic language needs of African Americans addressed in the last 2008 instructional materials adoption. Those books and those instructional materials that were adopted as of 2008 is in very, very few schools. I was trying to find the data, but right now, out of the large 30, I think there are 30 large urban districts across the state. Less than right now, 10% of those districts have adopted these current instructional materials. And it is because of the funding and the adoption the funding for the adoption has been put into a block grant, and so therefore districts have a flexibility of using the money instead of having to purchase the instructional material. They may be able to use it to do whatever they feel is fit. And so with that, I think I will close and ask for any questions that you may have of me.
Okay, we're going to hold the questions. Thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll have our final presentation from Alicia Harris.
Hello, everybody. Well, my name is Alicia Harris from Health Professions High School, and a lot of people touched on a lot of the reasons I think there is an education gap and African Americans, or Hispanics for that matter. I think it has a lot to do with environment, attendance, and motivation. With your environment, there's pride in our culture, but not pride in education. I think my peers around me, they don't really take pride in education because it's not cool, or it's not in. It's sort of like education is. The word for them is it's. I don't want to say it's not cool, but basically, the way education is, you go to school to be something, but a lot of people, they're going through problems with their families. I have a single parent mother. She works 3 or 4 jobs right now, and I have to take care of my brothers and sisters. A lot of times I didn't want to do a lot of programs or excel because the more I expand, I didn't want to be more of a burden to my mom. So a lot of times that can happen. With attendance, a lot of the teachers, they don't understand that a lot of the teachers can't handle your average African American student. Like my teacher in medical science, she says that you lose points if you don't show up, if you're not on time to school. She said that should motivate you to get to school. That doesn't motivate me to get to school at all. In fact, that makes me more mad. That makes me not want to come to school. That makes me think, okay, well, you're taking points off me not getting to school. I come from Elk Grove all the way to Health Professions, which is downtown. I can't always be there on time. Motivation to get there. A lot of kids don't want to get there. A lot of kids don't want to get there because the classes are not pertaining to what they want to do in life, such as pre-cal. I think if I want to go into something that's more of a comfortable, let's say I wanted to sing or dance, how does math come involved in that? I don't see why a lot of people don't want to go to school because of that.
Didn't you choose to go to the sales profession school?
Yes, I did choose to go to Health Professions because I saw the road that my 2 sisters went going to a traditional high school. They went to Luther Burbank, got kicked out. They went to Thurgood, and the cycle, it didn't work. So I wanted to go to Health Professions to try to, why not change the cycle? Let's change something. Let's do something. I don't want to have my head in a book all day. I want hands-on. I want to see more PowerPoints. I want to see more, hands-on work with my teachers. So.
What health profession school? What will you be preparing to do?
Me, I want to be an obstetrician. Mm-hmm. I want to go into women medicine. A lot of time in my freshman year, when I was younger, I was sexually abused, but a lot of my teachers did not know that. And sometimes they prejudge. I would come to class late, or I wouldn't have a good day, and they would just prejudge. And or if I didn't agree with what they were saying in class, and I went against it, they would feel like I'm challenging their authority, and they would just send me out on a referral. And a lot of times, I did not want to go to school my freshman, sophomore year, and now my junior, senior year, it kind of motivated me to want to come to school more because I saw other kids excelling, and I thought to myself, okay, why can't I do the same thing? Why can't I just build myself and get up to their level? And a lot of people have stereotypes of African Americans. I had a Hmong friend that told me, you're good at research? Oh, I thought you were, I only thought you were good at drawing and things like that. She really stereotyped me about my education. She thought I wasn't able to meet up to where the level she was. So it kind of motivated me to want to do better.
So you're going to go to medical school?
I want to go to a medical school. Right now I want to go to Tuskegee and then come back to California for medical school. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to, with all the budget cuts, I don't want to stay here and fight for my classes. I want to go somewhere and then come back for medical school. And I think that the budget cuts and a lot of things have changed the way people say, okay, you can go to college, you can do this. But when we actually get there, there's so many obstacles to get there. Financially, I don't have it. Financially, other people don't have it, and to get there is really, really hard, and people make it sound easy.
One question about medical school. And when you have these courses, do you think being on time would be important? And if so, why do you think being on time to medical school, when you go to class in medical school?
I mean, you don't want to miss out on anything that you're learning. I think it's important because you do need to be there on time. But for the most part, I think it's self-motivation too. You got to want to be there. And a lot of people don't have that self-motivation. Some is socially. To me, it has to do with environment and support, the support you have.
So my final question to you is, as a doctor, what do you hope to accomplish as a doctor?
What I hope to accomplish? I hope to accomplish like helping young girls such as myself, or not just in African American community, but all races or minorities of any kind of I want to help them strive for their goals, or like, I don't know how to say it, but I just want to help other people go for their goals. And a lot of these programs, I mean, they say they help, but a lot of them are just playtime. You don't have too much education in these programs. All these programs are just playtime.
Well, thank you for that and sharing.
Yeah, well, thank you. Listen, thank you for your persistence, for your stick-to-itiveness. It's not easy, but you're demonstrating that it's possible to succeed, and it's that kind of positive outlook that will make a difference. And so keep up the good work.
Thank you.
We're going to thank our two panelists for their comments and open the floor for comments, questions from the audience. If you have a question, if you'll approach the table, state your name, and ask your question, we will welcome you. Come on. Yeah. Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much.
My name is James Sweeney, and I am here today representing the California Black media, more particularly the leadership of Hardy and Cheryl Brown, and they wanted to make sure that we, first of all, thanked you for holding this hearing. They are vitally concerned about standards, and we know that clearly kids read the conscious and unconscious message, and I think that the point here is that we want our educators to have enough love and respect for our children so that the unconscious message that they read is one that is supportive and affirming, so that those numbers that are bad can be turned around and made better. So on behalf of the California Black media, which represents 2.5 million people weekly, it's turned over 4 to 6 times. So you can do the math. We are vitally concerned about what you're doing here, and we would like to continue to report that in our 47 newspapers and 3 radio stations in California. And because I can read body language, that's it and that's all.
Thank you for being so conversant. Any other comments or questions? Please come forward. State your name.
Hi, my name is Darlene Anderson, and I'm a pretty active parent in Sacramento County. And I really had a concern when Race at the Top came up, because African American people generally have not been involved in the process of engaging themselves to prepare themselves for the money. And so when the application finally went in, I watched the process because I'm very engaged in the school system, and our community still had not been contacted, although there was 23% input from California from African American people. I didn't know who those people were. And so in understanding what's happening in the shift in the required changes, I don't know that we have a voice still in the SARB process. The SARB, I understand, is changing, and I don't know that the African American community has a voice in the process of those changes, because we're free and we we kind of like came into the public school system in the 60s, and we were there. But we didn't have a voice as to how our children were treated. And so now we've been in the public education system without a voice. And people have determined what benefit we will have from services provided from the public education system. So where it is that we determined that we should be the voice for services for our children and have some oversight. This is kind of like the process of oversight for the data for the state of California, for the children either not making it or making it. And this chamber of elected officials have input as to how our kids are doing here in California, and should we have more oversight in the process and selection of who is providing services. And I just don't see that. And so even if we apply for Race to the Top funds and they are granted to California, I don't know who will be successful when they pay $91,000 for an African-American youth to be in prison in the penitentiary, in the juvenile system, and $243,000 in the adult system. And so there are so many concerns. But we are in the fabric of America. So if we're in the fabric of America here in California, especially in California, we have educators, and we should have a voice as to the data that's being collected by the state and the California Department of Education as to how services and who some of the oversight procedures that should be established. And that's why I came. I came because we need to have a voice in the oversight.
Well, thank you for coming. And this certainly is one level of accountability at the state level, but also your local school board is your first level. And so I would just encourage you to continue being an active, engaged, and involved parent on issues that impact not just your kids, but the entire system. And come out supporting events like this, express yourself, and be that squeaky wheel that gets the grease. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair and distinguished caucus members, my name is Darrell Jenkins. I'm the president of 100 Black Men of Sacramento, and it's refreshing to hear what we see every day in mentoring in schools. One of the things that I would just, they're very brief in terms of what we're trying to identify and hopefully work with the school districts is this concept of a new paradigm. And I think the challenge for you is to help us create a new paradigm and thought in terms of what we heard today, in terms of the expectations of school districts and teachers and parents. I mean, it takes all three. And the collective work, we need your help to figure out how we pull that together, especially for African American families, because some of the components that were discussed, and one of the things that I hope you got out of this presentation was there needs to be identification of root cause in terms of engagement. See, the engagement associated with education has to be stimulated. When I heard the piece that they were identifying preschoolers as special ed students is what's happening to our young people. Also, the engagement in the classroom in terms of providing education that excites our young people about learning is also a challenge. The biggest challenge, too, when you think back about the education that we had and the schools we all went to, several different schools, it was integrated in the sense that it didn't care what color you were. It was about the quality of education you were given. So if we're looking at a new paradigm and all of these different things and everything that was discussed has been discussed for over 20 years already. So when you sit down here and you say you want a hearing, the challenge for all of us is what are we going to really do? What are we going to do to change the effect and the cause of what's happening to education in California and, to our young people? And that is a question for you. What are you going to do? My question to you is, what can you do? What can we do? And we need your direction so that we can support you to make a change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Let me just tell him that in addition to those issues, we need a collaboration, as Dr. Russo said, with community groups as well, particularly for those students who don't have parents of means that can make the difference in their lives.
Okay.
Yes.
Good evening, gentlemen. I know we're tired. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Just tell us who you are.
My name is Davina Woodyard. I'm actually an English teacher at Locke High School with, well, now it's Green Dot, but it used to be part of Los Angeles Unified School District. And I'm also Dr. Rousseau's, one of her students. I'm working on the dissertation with her regarding the partnership. And so I felt compelled to come up here today to tell you that I'm blessed in the fact that I came from a two-parent home. My mother has been sitting with me throughout this entire presentation. And to this day, at 27 years old, my parents still mandate to meet my teachers. And they met Dr. Rousseau outside, and my dad came. He works 2 blocks from here. And I wanted to bring to your attention that not every student has that resource, and it's something that we need to take into consideration. And I also wanted to caution you, Paulo Freire says that if we are going to do school reform, that we might come into it with a positive attitude, because we're assuming that the community doesn't know what it takes and doesn't know what it needs in order to have effective school reform. And so I caution you when you leave tonight, on when people ask you the question, what are you going to do? We need to transform the question to, what are we going to do? And one of the things that I've learned working with Crenshaw High School and the Greater Crenshaw Educational Partnership is that parents are victims of the school system, and we need to keep that in mind. School is a socialization process, and someone said earlier that parents are asleep. Parents have been told to be asleep, especially African American parents. They've been told to be asleep. They've been told that it's okay to stay asleep, and they come at school with an attitude, because schools sometimes carry an imperialistic culture where we know best. We've gone to school. We know what to do with your child. Just make sure they do their homework, and if they don't, we might give them a D. And what I would say to you, gentlemen, you asked the question earlier, what can we do as a legislator to ensure academic achievement for African American students? My one thing that I say to you in parting tonight is push partnerships. If you have a low-performing school, and it's in a community, especially as rich as Los Angeles, where I went to UCLA for undergrad, I went to LMU for my master's, I'm at USC right now for my doctorate. When you have these higher education institutions that are ready for partnerships and are putting out teachers that are going to teach in the community, we need to push partnerships. We need to collaborate with community organizations so that parents can feel enfranchised again. Because what we need to recognize is that there's a culture of distrust between parents and schools. And somehow we need to fragment that distrust so that they can work collaboratively and co-construct what needs to be done best for their students.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening. My name is Carl Pinkston. I just provided you a report. I'm representing the Black Parallel School Board. We recently just published a report on the status of black students' education in the Sacramento City Unified School District. And I'm only going to highlight 2 things which are critically important and suggest 2 things. One is that what we found out based on a number of studies that has been done, and then our recent one, was that it will take approximately 42 years to reduce the achievement gap in Sacramento City Unified School District. 42 years at the rate that the rate of progress. That's a tragedy. We also was able to demonstrate in the statistic that there were only 8 students that are in African American students in the city of Sacramento's Unified School District that are in geometry. 8. So just to give you an example, and the data will pretty much demonstrate a lot of the tragedy. Now, we're saying the house is on fire. We need some really drastic things that needs to be done. So 2 things I would strongly suggest for you. One, and I think it's following in the footstep of Dr. McKenna, which he talked about the revolution will be televised. I would strongly suggest that you be black. And what I mean by be black is when budget issues, when policy issues are made, you say, what is it for black people? So when the race to the top is being raised, is a proposal being raised, you say, what's in it for black people? And you make a very specific line item for black people, for black students. There are programs for ESL, there are programs for Native American, but there is not a program for black students who are at the bottom, as what you just saw in the statewide data, that specifically address black students. And the last but not least, is most important that was brought up was to partner, and to partner with community-based organizations like ourselves, the Black Parallel School Board, the Parent Voices, and other groups, because that's going to be your key ally in terms of bringing about fundamental change that you currently have a house on fire. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just want to say, as the other lady is coming up right now, that the purpose of the Black Caucus is because they're supposed to be asking that question. That's why we have a Latino caucus, that's why we have an Asian caucus, and that's why we have a Black caucus.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Lorraine Brown, and I am one of the writers and work with the Black Parallel School Board, as well as a professor at National University, and I'm also a retired educator of 35 years with Sac City School District and others. There were several things that I just wanted to bring up that I didn't hear about before, and one indirectly I did hear about when the discussion was relative to what can we do, and the pamphlet that we had from Dr. McKenna was disseminated. There was a mention of the teacher training academies, and I wanted to say to you that the university preparation for teacher credentialing is now reviving around various lines. It's not just happening then at the CSUS colleges or UC Davis or Berkeley, so forth. You have colleges like Phoenix, University of Phoenix, National University, Everett University, a lot of the smaller universities that are also providing training and helping students advance to their candidacy. But what is not happening there is just a mirror of what's not happening at the California Commission of Teaching credentialing, and that is the focus on a class or training that is designed for teachers, teacher candidates, and something that's mandatory that they have to go through. Now, several years ago, I started looking into why this happens. Why is it that this kind of training that we've been talking about all night, all day here, that focuses on culturally conscious training for African American educators, why hasn't that happened? I found that there were two reasons why it doesn't happen. At the local level, it doesn't happen because the State Department has identified streams of educational training that must occur and that can only be funded if they address those particular streams. Do you understand what So the options that are provided through the State Department are limited in focus, and that they do not include focus on African American issues that relate to the successful achievement of African American students. So that's part of it. So when a school gets ready to fund or to establish such training, they initially go for funding, and they go to the State Department for that funding. Well, that funding, unless you're on a list or unless you meet the requirements of certain training, that does not occur. So that's one thing that I'd like you to look into and see if you can't reform.
All right, something else?
Yeah, the last one is the focus on the commission itself. If we could make sure that that training is mandatory through the California Commission, so that the bill or whatever that you develop comes through the commission, because that commission translates the training requirements to all of the universities, the universities that are not California State universities or UC Davis or universities such as National and or University Pacific and other schools, University of Phoenix, other schools that provide credential training.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am a working school teacher. I'm an English teacher for middle school. I agree with Dr. Brown that one of the crucial things in closing the achievement gap has got to be teacher quality. I'm working at a school where I believe that most of the teachers really do not believe that the kids can learn from a rigorous curriculum. I had an experience this week that kind of blew me away. I gave a literary biography project to my students. Most of them are Latino and African American. And I had to go before the leadership committee. I work in the Sacramento City Unified School District. I had to go before the leadership committee to justify my assignment, because most of the teachers felt that the assignment was too difficult. It was a literary biography assignment dealing with the American classic writers. After I justified the project to them, they went on to say that I should have never given the project to the students because it was too difficult. I also want to say with my parents, about 10 parents protested the project. 9 of them were African American and 1 was Caucasian. I think that was a result of their kids having low expectations for year after year after year of low expectations, and that's exactly what they expected, and nothing rigorous and nothing standard-based. If we do not give our students a rigorous curriculum, they will never, ever catch up. That quality, teacher quality, really needs to be implemented in the credential program. Teaching is a second profession for me. I found my experience in getting a credential was terrible. I really felt that I created a $30,000 bill and got little from it. I'm hoping that maybe the legislature will make it a requirement for student teachers to do X amount of weeks in an urban setting and then also in a suburban setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent idea.
Thank you, Chair. Jeff Freitas with the California Federation of Teachers, and I wasn't really ready to speak on this today, going through all the regular committees.
It's okay, just make it brief.
I will make it brief. Actually, during the presentations that I did make in the last half, I was very much inspired. I'm a former teacher myself, and it kind of made me want to go back in the classroom and actually do something. I think I'm kind of beyond that right now, but the things that we need to be talking about, and we've talked to many of your offices over the last couple of days, weeks, and years, is we do need to get together and discuss these issues. This is a very difficult issue, and it needs to be discussed. And unlike Race to the Top, it was not discussed with everybody in the room. And and even in what you heard in the panels, not everybody would agree on what to do next. And when Assemblymember Davis asked, what can you do as legislators, they really weren't saying what bills to pass, but what needs to get done in the community. And I think we need to have that discussion, and that's not happening. This is the beginning of that. I thank you for having this. This was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm Steve Rhodes. I'll make it brief, but I'll give a couple suggestions. Williams money is in the budget. You might want to look at that. And second, Rod Wright, Senator, very concerned about the health and the services for his kids. You might want to take a look at Healthy Start. Third, this is a client of mine now, Avid, but you might want to talk to Compton and Oakland, and they get kids in college, and they don't take algebra, they take calculus and pre-calculus and AP classes. Fourth, you ought to also focus on the higher education sectors. You ought to find out how long it takes kids to get through school, how many drop out, what are the courses they get, what are the type of jobs. Your children need to know that. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Well, speaking for my colleagues, I just want to thank all of our panelists who participated, those of you in the audience who stayed, and special thanks to some individuals who really made today possible. Phyllis Marshall, representing the black advocates here in the Capitol, very instrumental. The Malassa guy, who's not here now but was helpful. I want to thank Opry Dupree from the chairman's office, Reggie Fair from my office, Fahisa is with us still. It was just really a collaborative effort. And, we certainly heard lots of obstacles, but I think we heard some opportunities as well. And I'm convinced this certainly is just a start. This is the beginning of the conversation. And I know some of you say, gee, we've been having this conversation too long. Well, maybe so. But, we're going to have it again. And you have the commitment from the Legislative Black Caucus to move forward on some of the specific ideas and suggestions that have been proposed. We are committed to it. We understand and appreciate the importance of education and of closing the gap, whatever you want to call it. But we want to make sure that the resources are there and that African Americans are a part of the educational picture, the educational progress of California as we move forward. So with that, this hearing will be adjourned. And again, thank you for your participation and your attendance this evening.
And Mr. Chairman, we thank you for bringing education to the Black Caucus, and this is a very important issue. We look forward to doing it again.
Thank you.